Hey, how's it going? This is Sam Sauter from West Channel Media. In today's video, I want to talk to you guys about LinkedIn ads and how we manage over about $300,000 per month profitably right now for all of our clients on specifically Meta, LinkedIn, and Facebook. LinkedIn is a big chunk of that overall marketing spend each month, and it's one of the highest converting, highest quality traffic lead sources for our clients. Not a lot of people know how to run LinkedIn ads properly, in my opinion. Even myself, somebody who was an experienced advertiser for 5 to 7 years when I first started testing LinkedIn ads, we were running ads for our own agency to acquire clients, and we basically just lit on fire all the money that we were testing because we were trying to apply the same mindset and same principles that we had garnered and learned from Meta as we did on LinkedIn. Fundamentally, first and foremost, what you have to understand is that LinkedIn's platform and its algorithm is not super sophisticated, it's not super refined. On Meta, each user has about 50 to 100,000 data points, and this is aggregated over years of users engaging with, clicking on, responding to certain comments, certain posts, and then after close to a decade now, it's been the dominant digital marketing platform in the world, and there's hundreds of billions of dollars of advertising money pumped through the Meta platform. It has become so incredibly user-friendly, so incredibly sophisticated, so unbelievably able to predict which users are going to result in a conversion event. And Meta is still to this day probably the most important platform that you should be leveraging if you're just getting started in 2025 as a beginner and you want to get a proof of concept advertising online. Now, if you're a more established business owner and you maybe already have Meta working, you're operating at $100,000 to $200,000 per month, tacking on LinkedIn can become an incredible source of additional traffic for you. HubSpot recently published a study that LinkedIn is the #1 highest converting platform as a whole. I want to share some of the data that we have today from aggregating all of our clients across 22 different industries. The quality of traffic and the caliber of a person that is frequently updating and concerned about their professional reputation, their professional career, it's orders of magnitude higher than somebody who's just browsing aimlessly, doom scrolling on Meta or Instagram. LinkedIn ads to this day is my favorite platform because we're very unique. There's not a lot of people that typically know how to run LinkedIn ads very profitably. If you just make a couple small tweaks, you can drop your lead cost dramatically and flood your business with high quality B2B leads. And a very common misconception is, oh, well, LinkedIn ads are too expensive compared to Meta. If you're accustomed to running B2B ads on Meta and you look at similar targeting options that are available to you on LinkedIn, oftentimes what you'll find is that the CPMs are actually lower in a lot of instances on LinkedIn ads than they are Meta. The main fundamental difference is that LinkedIn as a whole, the users are not as dopamine seeking, they're not doom scrolling, so the click-through rate on the platform as a whole is significantly lower. Most of our campaigns on Meta and Instagram right now have a click-through rate of about 2 to 5%. On LinkedIn ads, the average click-through rate of the platform is about 0.3% to 1%. It's very similar to advertising on the Google Display Network, if any of you guys are accustomed to advertising there. The quality of the click is significantly higher because people are more thoughtful, they're more intentioned, they just have a lot more intention behind their click, and they're not as easily distracted or pulled in different directions like they are on Meta. And we see that throughout every stage of the funnel, to where the conversion event, the close rate on the sales calls that are generated from these leads are higher, the show up rate is marginally higher because you're dealing with a much higher sophisticated, much more higher quality person in a lot of instances than you are. Another thing to keep in mind is, yes, your click-through rate is going to be lower, but you're typically going to have a much higher conversion rate on the leads. So another thing to keep in mind is that typically when we're advertising on Meta between all of our clients, only about 10 to about 40% of leads are resulting in a meaningful phone call. With LinkedIn, conversely, our clients on average from about 20 to about 60%. Okay, I know that's a bit of a range there, but typically what we find is the cost per call, the cost per qualified consultation is actually synonymous with Meta, because with Meta, we're typically disqualifying a much higher percentage of the leads. With LinkedIn, on the other hand, a very high percentage of those leads are resulting in a meaningful conversation. We have accounts where about 60 to 70% of the leads are showing up for appointments. And this is a huge opportunity because you can have less sales reps doing more volume. We all know that if you're running a B2B business, particularly if you're selling something that is very sophisticated, it's very, very hard to onboard sales talent, number one, and number two, sales talent that already knows your business. With LinkedIn, you have the ability to create a system that produces very, very high quality B2B leads that are very high quality, so you're not spending a tremendous amount of time doing prospecting, doing initial lead screening. Okay, you can have one rep that's maybe doing $50,000 to $60,000 per month on Meta, who's doing 100 outbound dials a day, and then you can take them onto LinkedIn ads and they can be doing $150,000 or $250,000 per month oftentimes, with a significantly less volume of leads, less headaches, less outbound dials, because the quality is so much higher. So that's something that people don't take into account. Let's talk about 3 key aspects that you want to leverage that are very tactical, very granular to make your LinkedIn ads campaigns much more profitable. So the first thing to keep in mind is that image ads typically perform better on the platform compared to video ads. The reason for that is that typically the video ad placement on LinkedIn requires you to bid a much higher amount in order to secure that placement. And often in my experience, that cost oftentimes isn't justified. On Meta, typically what we find is actually image ads can have a lower cost per lead, but sometimes we find that the conversion rate and the overall return on ad spend is lower because the image ad induces a much more impulsive click. There's not the nurturing and the additional information that is pumped through the video creative. So it's a bit misleading oftentimes on Meta. You'll start to get very cheap leads for the image ads that aren't converting at the same percentage as your video ad creatives were. On LinkedIn, conversely, the lead quality is so high, the click-through rate is lower. We really just need to garner and get a lead as possible because it's very easy to start having very, very expensive LinkedIn leads because the click-through rate of the platform is so low. So typically I opt to and I prefer to leverage image ads, get as many leads as humanly possible because I'm just so confident in the platform as a whole to produce qualified submissions. So I would typically opt for the image ad placement to produce that lower lead cost. The second thing to keep in mind is that we're not using automated bidding. So like we talked about in the earlier segment of this video, is that the platform and the algorithm of LinkedIn ads is not super sophisticated, not super well refined. If you're using something like automated bidding where you give the algorithm discretion to spend over your entire budget, something that I do recommend on Meta, however, what you're going to find is that your lead cost is going to rise tremendously. Typically what you need to do is you need to leverage a manual bidding strategy, or conversely, you need to leverage a cost cap bidding strategy to keep your costs down low. There's very, very large, big B2B players on LinkedIn that will oftentimes drive up the CPMs on an auction site, and making sure that you have a cost cap or a manual bid set in place, even if your budget doesn't allocate the full amount of spend, you're still going to prevent yourself from, having these exorbitantly high lead costs. Typically what these manual bids or these cost caps are going to result in is that you're either going to get no spend allocated to the specific ad, or you're going to have cheap leads as a result of that. It basically just sets a full limit on the full amount that you are willing to pay for a particular conversion event like a click or a lead. Definitely do not use automated bidding on LinkedIn ads. So the last and final key distinction in LinkedIn ads versus Meta ads is understanding targeting. So typically we are using about 50 to 100 different filters for most of our LinkedIn advertising campaigns. I know that sounds extreme, but hear me out. On Meta, there's $100 billion of every year of advertising dollars pumped through the platform. The machine learning algorithm becomes incredibly sophisticated. Most of the time, if you just target broad targeting, meaning you give it no instructions, you will get better results than if you try and explicitly tell it which audiences, which interest groups on Meta your ad should be shown to. Typically, overnight, a lot of our clients we take over, we start running their Meta advertising accounts. The last media buyer has interest-based targeting. We remove all that, upload those onto one CBO campaign structure, one main broad targeting campaign structure, and we leverage DCTs like we talked about in some other videos. And typically, a lot of times, about 80% of the time, we are able to drop our customers' lead costs by about 60 to about 40% on Meta a lot of times. Now on LinkedIn, it's a completely different animal. The algorithm is not sophisticated. The algorithm is not refined. So by not having very, very explicit details and instructions on how to be targeting your specific audiences, you're going to get very, very bad results. Do not try and operate with a broad targeting mindset like you do on Meta and bring that over into LinkedIn, or your campaigns are going to fail. So as a general rule of thumb, typically what I'm trying to do on LinkedIn is I'm trying to construct about a dozen to 24 audiences that are between 50 and 150,000 people. The main filters that you can be typically using are the industry filter, which is very, very helpful. The second you can be using is the job seniority filter. Okay, this is very important. If you're targeting a very specific job title, like a data analyst, there might be very, very similar job titles that are great potential customers for you, but are not included in that specific job title because of a very marginal difference. By leveraging job seniority, however, you are then grouping in potentially an entire group of people that are in that similar role, similar industry, in that similar company size. So if your audience size looks too low by just targeting what on that specific job title that you like, I would highly recommend that you start looking at job seniorities. The hierarchy for the job seniorities on the LinkedIn advertising platform starts with the owner, then moves to the partner status, then moves to the vice president status, and then I believe it's manager, and then there's some other much more junior titles that we don't typically leverage with most of our clients. Typically with most of our clients, we are not going below the vice president level of seniority. Another thing to keep in mind is very, very important that you're leveraging the company size filters. What you're typically going to find is that if you run a split test with different company sizes and those range based on the employee count, that you're going to get radically different results in your response rate. So it's very, very key to know who is your ICP, what size of business are you targeting. Run a split test to target different sizes of those businesses. You're going to notice wide discrepancies in your cost per lead for those various split tests, but then you have to do the calculation to see what is the value of those leads. Maybe you're paying a premium to go after those larger companies companies, but oftentimes it's worth it if the opportunity size is 100x the value. So take that into account, something to think about. You can even target Fortune 500 companies on the platform. Another option that you have available to you is actually to filter your targeting based on revenue. We typically are not finding best results with that. We're typically opting to filter company size based on the amount of employees that associate with that page. But nonetheless, LinkedIn also has a predictive model to guess and ascertain what the revenue would be roughly of a business. My LinkedIn advertising rep tells me that it's about 80% accurate. It takes into account a bunch of different metrics like the industry, the company size, to give you that prediction on what the company's revenue is. So it's something worthwhile to include in your split test, but just know that you have that available to you. The last thing that I would highly encourage you to do if you're running any types of LinkedIn ads is to obsess and be very, very cognizant over your exclusions. So it's very, very important to define exactly what filters are important to you in your targeting. It is also equally important to exclude the inverse of that. So typically what we're finding with most of our clients is that even LinkedIn, when we give it very, very explicit targeting options, we're very, very clear on who we're going after, we're still going to get weird clicks of people that shouldn't be there if the exclusions are not set there in place. So it's very, very clear that you think about who your ICP is, explicitly state in the positive those filters and those targeting options that make sense. Have about a dozen different campaigns that test different variations of that explicit targeting. And then you want to exclude the inverse of that. Pay very close attention to the industries that you're excluding. That is the most important exclusion to include on your campaigns. Think about what is your ideal industry that you want to target, and then exclude everything else that is in the inverse of that. What you're going to find is as you're adding these exclusions in, you're going to notice your audience size on the LinkedIn advertising platforms starts to drop precipitously. Okay, and that's a sign that all of that advertising spend would have been wasted and shown to audiences that had zero relevance to your product or your service. So that's pretty much all I have to share with you guys today. If you want to stop competing in the saturated red ocean that is Facebook and YouTube, and you want very, very high quality B2B leads at a very affordable price on LinkedIn, schedule a consultation with my team below. You have to be doing a minimum of $50,000 to $100,000 per month in revenue, absolute bare minimum. Most of our clients are doing between $300,000 and $400,000 per month in revenue, but this is an incredible platform that you guys should be tapping into. You should be leveraging in. If you are advertising on Meta, we will give you a guarantee that we will actually beat the performance of that existing platform. In some instances, it depends on your business if we have a case study there, but we have a very high degree of conviction in our ability to produce results on this platform. So again, that's pretty much everything that I have for you guys today. If you are serious about growing your business through LinkedIn advertising, schedule a consultation below. Most of our clients are doing $100,000, $200,000 per month. If you're doing less than that, still schedule a call. We might have something that is maybe a more kind of less done for you capacity, more done with you, to some type of consulting agreement that could work out. So regardless, fill out your consultation. My team will be in touch to see if we can help you. Just to summarize, LinkedIn is the platform we're most excited about. It's our unique and differentiator. If you're a business and you're doing really well on Meta, I would highly encourage you to add in LinkedIn on top of that as a diversifier. And then oftentimes what you'll find is it actually converts better and the return on ad spend is higher. So great platform, something to consider. Fill out your information below. I look forward to hopefully speaking with you, and I'll talk to you soon. Thanks.